Poor single mom boarded the wrong flight. Didn't know the man sitting beside her was the lonely CEO who'd change her life. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you right now." The voice was urgent but hushed. Julia looked up, startled. A flight attendant stood beside her, leaning slightly inward, her tone calm but firm. "You're not supposed to be on this flight," she said quietly. "Your boarding pass was issued under a different name. Julia Dawson. There's been a mix-up." Julia's heart thudded. She instinctively clutched her sleeping son tighter. I boarded at the right gate," she said, her voice shaking. "I believe you, but your name isn't on the manifest. And since we've already left the gate, we can't return. You'll need to stay in your seat. We'll take care of it after we land." Julia stared, stunned, her cheeks burning. She could feel the eyes now, passengers glancing over, murmuring. Her breath hitched. "I didn't mean to do anything wrong," she said softly. "You're not in trouble," the attendant reassured her. "It happens more often than you think. Just sit tight." Julia nodded faintly, swallowing against the dryness in her throat. Her son stirred, then settled again. She lowered her gaze, pressing her cheek against his hair, trying to disappear. Only a few hours earlier, she had been waiting at the terminal. Her blonde ponytail was messy, her coat too big, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. She looked older than 29, not because of age, but because of exhaustion and years of single motherhood. She had been heading to her mother's house in Maine. Months of saving had made this trip possible. Noah's asthma was worsening again, and her mom had begged her to come home for a while. Julia had finally agreed. The airport had been crowded. When boarding was called, the surge of passengers pushed forward. Jostled, she hadn't noticed her boarding pass fall from her pocket. Another pass was already on the floor nearby. She picked it up, thinking it was hers. She didn't notice the name Julian Dawson printed at the top. At the gate, the staff member barely looked up. She saw a young mother with a sleeping child and waved her through. No questions, no ID check. And now, here Julia sat on a plane heading to the wrong destination. Too late to fix anything. Her face burned. Her son, still asleep, shifted slightly. She rocked him gently, trying to steady her breath. Passengers around her whispered. Someone turned to glance at her, then looked away. Julia stared ahead, her vision blurring. The man beside her had said nothing throughout. She hadn't looked at him, until now. From the corner of her eye, she saw him. Early 30s, perhaps older, with dark hair and a composed expression. He wore a charcoal jacket. His hands rested loosely in his lap. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted. His silence wasn't cold. It was considerate. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. The quiet presence beside her was oddly comforting. Her son sighed in his sleep, and she kissed the top of his head, grounding herself in that familiar scent. She had made a mistake, but it wasn't careless or foolish. It had been exhaustion. It had been motherhood. The flight attendant moved on down the aisle. Slowly, the whispers faded, and the hum of the engines filled the space. Julia sat quietly, her heart still racing, wondering what would happen next, and if, just maybe, this mistake was leading her exactly where she was meant to go. The plane had been taxiing for several minutes when the flight attendant returned to Julia's row, her tone hushed but kind. "It was our mistake," she said. "The other passenger's been rerouted, and since we've left the gate, you can stay on board. We'll assist you after landing." Julia nodded, cheeks still flushed. She adjusted her son asleep in her lap, his head slipping awkwardly to the side. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and exhaled. A subtle movement beside her caught her eye. The man in the aisle seat leaned forward, quietly removed his coat, folded it, and placed it beneath her son's head with careful precision. He didn't say a word, didn't meet her eyes, just checked that the boy was comfortable, then resumed his silence. Julia whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once. Outside the window, the last of the day faded into dusk. Inside, the soft hum of the engine filled the quiet. Julia leaned back, the tension in her shoulders easing a little. The man hadn't spoken to her once, yet his presence felt reassuring, gentle, grounding. Then, as the plane rose into the air, he finally spoke. "Rough day?" She turned, surprised. "More like a rough year." He gave a faint smile. "Fair enough." She hesitated, then added, "I was supposed to be flying to Maine to see my mom. Thought I booked the right flight, but apparently not." He glanced at her son. "At least you're not alone." She smiled gently. "That's Noah. He's 3. He's had a hard few months. Severe asthma. I've been working doubles just to afford his meds. My mom offered to help for a while, so we were headed there. Or, supposed to be. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer platitudes. Just listened. I'm a waitress, she continued. Evenings and weekends mostly. It's all I could get after my husband passed. Car crash. 2 years ago this February. Her voice caught, but she pressed on. I've been doing okay, I guess. Just tired. Some days I feel like the world's pressing down on me, and I'm doing everything I can not to break. He nodded. I know that feeling. His voice was quiet, but something in it made her look up. There was a shadow in his eyes. Something he wasn't saying. I've had moments, she said slowly, where I've wished I could just get on the wrong flight. Start over somewhere. Somewhere with no bills, no grief, no emergency room visits at 2 in the morning. He tilted his head. Sounds like today, you kinda did. She gave a soft laugh, then paused, her smile fading. I used to think maybe I was cursed, like the universe had it out for me. She looked down at Noah, brushing his hair gently. But maybe it's not a curse, she whispered. Maybe I'm just on a longer route than most. The silence stretched between them, deep and full. I used to think I was broken, she said. But tonight, I think maybe I'm not. The man turned toward the window, the glow of the cabin lights reflected in the glass, catching in his eyes. He didn't speak, but something about him shifted. His shoulders relaxed, his jaw unclenched. Julia leaned back, holding her son a little closer. He nestled into the coat beneath him, sleeping soundly. The plane moved forward, high above a city neither of them planned to reach, yet maybe, just maybe, exactly where they were supposed to be. Something honest in her eyes. Something raw, unguarded in her exhaustion, her embarrassment, her quiet resilience. And in the way she'd spoken about her son, her struggles, her pain, without a hint of self-pity. She had simply existed without apology. And for a few hours, he had felt something stir in him that he thought had died with Lily. He stood slowly, reaching for his coat, his fingers brushing the seatbelt buckle she'd just unlatched. He wondered if he should have asked for a number, a name, something. But the moment had passed. She was gone. And all he had now was a first name, a memory, and the distinct feeling that something real, something rare, had slipped through his fingers. As he stepped off the plane, the noise of the terminal enveloped him. Screens blinked. Announcements echoed. People rushed past. But everything felt oddly distant. Somewhere ahead, a woman named Julia was being escorted to fix a mistake. But to him, the real mistake was not finding a way to hold on to what had just walked away. Christopher couldn't stop thinking about her. It had been days since the flight, but Julia lingered in his mind like a melody that refused to fade. He replayed the sound of her voice, the curve of her tired smile, the way she'd held her son with fierce, quiet devotion. He remembered the way she said thank you, not out of politeness, but like it truly mattered. He didn't even know her last name. He could have asked the airline to look up the manifest. He had the power, the resources. But it felt wrong. Too invasive. Too clinical. Julia deserved more than to be tracked like a transaction. So instead, he wrote something else. Sitting at his desk early one morning, Christopher composed a short email to his company's internal communications team. He didn't know exactly why. He only knew that something inside him needed to be said. The note was simple, a thank you to a stranger. A reflection on how one unexpected meeting could stay with you long after the plane had landed. She boarded by mistake, he wrote. But she wasn't a mistake. She reminded me that people still carry goodness with them, even in the most exhausting, uncertain moments. She held her son, like the world was watching. She spoke with honesty I hadn't heard in years. I never even got her full name, but I won't forget her. He sent it, not expecting anything. A few days later, someone from the marketing team reached out. One of their junior writers, Ellie, had read his note and been moved. We'd love to share this, she said. Just as a story. Something real. No names, of course. Just initials. It might touch someone the way it touched us. Christopher hesitated only briefly before agreeing. The post went live on the company's blog under the title, Some Flights Aren't Mistakes. You just don't understand the destination yet. It spread like wildfire. People shared it online with captions like, "This gave me chills," and "Faith in humanity restored." Comments poured in, stories of strangers who had changed lives in quiet moments, of long flights that left lasting impressions, of chance meetings that felt like something more. Christopher read them all. Somewhere across the country, in a back room of the diner where she worked weekends, Julia's phone buzzed with a message from a former coworker. It was just a link and a line of text. "This sounds like you. You need to read it." She clicked, not expecting much. Just curiosity. But as she scrolled, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. He hadn't said her name. He hadn't described her in detail. But it was all there. Her son. The wrong flight, the exhaustion, the honesty. The moment that had felt too real to be random. Her eyes filled with tears. She sat down on a bench near the kitchen, hands trembling as she held the phone. Noah was coloring nearby, humming softly to himself, his small voice rising and falling like a lullaby. She wiped her cheek, trying to compose herself, but it was too late. The emotion was already spilling over. "Mommy." Noah looked up, puzzled. "Why are you crying?" Julia smiled through the tears. "I'm okay, sweetie." He looked at her more closely. "Is it the coat man?" She let out a quiet laugh, nodding. "Yes, it's the coat man." "Did he lose his coat?" "No," she whispered, brushing a hand over his hair. "I think he found something. And maybe I did too." She sat with the phone in her lap for a long moment, staring at the final lines of the post. There was a brief note from the editor, encouraging anyone who might recognize themselves in the story to reach out. Julia hesitated. Then, quietly, she opened her email app and began to type a short message, just a few lines. She didn't explain everything. She didn't need to. She simply said that she believed she was the woman from the flight, and that she had read his words. And they had reached her. When she hit send, her hands were still shaking. But for the first time in a long time, the trembling wasn't from fear. It was from the fragile, beautiful weight of being seen.